Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm the Flamehead97, and I just want to say Merry Christmas to everybody. This is going to be one of two year-endless videos. For this video, be top 5 disappointing albums of 2022. My other year-endless video, which will be top 15 albums of 2022, will be uploaded at a later day, because I still got some other albums to prepare for that list. But for now, welcome to top 5 disappointing albums of 2022. This is just my list. No one has to agree with it. These are just 5 albums that I just think were disappointing, and are albums that didn't really do much for me through their release and all the way to now, and so on and so forth. So that's pretty much all I'm going to say for an introduction. Let's go and get started with this shit. So number 5 is Totem by Soulfly. I know people that like this band and album would be disappointed with me or think I'm crazy for having this on here, but I don't care about that because this album just doesn't do much for me. This album just doesn't really do anything all that good for me, so I'm not really interested in this album all that much. I mean, I try to listen to it in full once or twice, but it just doesn't really do anything for me, in all honesty. I mean, their last album, Ritual, released in 2018, was a really good album. But this album, Totem, it just doesn't really do much. The songs are short. It's just an album that just feels basic and all that to me. Even though I like this band, I was not really into this album. That's all I'll say. But it's not the most disappointing thing of the year. But it still, however, manages to make the list. I don't think this is necessarily a bad album, but it's not all that good either, so it's pretty much a disappointing album if you ask me. So that's what earns a spot on the list. I don't hate the album, I'm just not really into it. So number 4 is Requiem by Korn. I couldn't really come back to this album at all that much. I've probably only listened to it in full maybe 2 times, and that's about it, because a lot of these songs just, they're boring. It doesn't feel like the Korn that we all know and love. They just feel like a band who just want to make radio-friendly new metal now. And it's disappointing to say that because Korn is one of my favorite bands of all time. They've been a band I've been a fan of for many years, even before I got into metal full time. And it just sucks to say that because a lot of their other albums are really good, but Requiem is definitely one of my least favorite albums in their discography. I just don't really care much for this album, and Time is Healing, I think, is the name of that song. It was like the lead single from that album. I think that's the name of the song, I'm not sure, because I haven't listened to this album in a while. But this album is boring to me. It doesn't feel like Korn, and it's easily one of my least favorites. I'm not going to ever really check out this album because it's just boring. It's a short album too. It only had like fucking 9 songs on it. That's just way too short for a Korn album. It felt like more like a EP instead of a studio album. This album feels like it was rushed, and like they didn't really want to put any fucking effort into it, because most of the songs are just radio-friendly new metal, as already mentioned. So what is there really else to say? It's just a album that doesn't do much. Even longtime Korn fans were probably disappointed, and I am too. So Requiem by Korn easily makes the list. Number 3 is Love Sucks by Avril Lavigne. Just like with her 2019 album Head Above Water, makes another disappointing albums list, because Head Above Water I had in a video where I'd done disappointing albums of 2019. And her follow-up album, Love Sucks, is no different. I mean, I don't think this album was necessarily all that bad, but it was just a generic pop-punk album I mean, there were a few songs on this album I didn't mind, like Bite Me, Boy's Eye with Machine Gun Kelly, Avalanche, Deja Vu, and Dare to Love Me, but those were like the only songs that I really liked from the album. I mean, she has a song on there with Mark Hoppus. It wasn't a bad song either, but most of this album is just not very good for Avril Lavigne. I don't know what happened to Avril Lavigne, but after Goodbye Lullaby, she started going downhill, and it's pretty much been that way ever since, even though I didn't mind her 2013 self-titled album, but anything after Goodbye Lullaby and even self-titled hasn't really done much for me, and that's sad because Avril Lavigne is one of my favorite singers of all time. So, yeah, Love Sucks. This album just not very good. I mean, it's not the worst thing I've ever heard, but when it comes to Avril Lavigne, it's another album of hers that I just don't really care for. Just those songs that I mentioned to you guys are like the only ones I like, and I don't come back to this album just like the first two albums in the list. So, yeah, this is just another album of the year that doesn't really do much. It's basically just a typical Avril Lavigne album. If you want to hear good Avril Lavigne, I would recommend her first few albums. I mean, she's a good singer, but her newer music just doesn't do much. So, Love Sucks by Avril Lavigne, in at number 3. I don't hate this album, I'm just not really into it, because it's just generic at best. Number 2 is Dominion by Skillet. Of course, this album makes the list. Skillet's been making horrible arena rock music since like 2016. Their last actual good album was Rise, released in 2013. So, Unleashed, Victorious, and Dominion, those are like the 3 most generic Skillet albums like ever released. Dominion may have had like 3 or 4 good songs, but the rest of this album is just same old Skillet. If you heard Unleashed and Victorious, then you've heard all you got here with Dominion. So, Skillet's Dominion, I'm not going to say much about it, but the song Destiny is definitely the best song on the album. Refuge was a good song. And I think their song White Horse is like one of the worst songs that they ever fucking made. That song is shit, and it still is. It's an abomination to Skillet's discography, that song is. So fuck that song in this album. Number 1 is Get Rolling by Nickelback. This album, I couldn't listen to again. I only checked it out in full one time, and I was very disappointed with this album. And that sucks because I love Nickelback. They're one of my favorite rock bands of all time. And just why did they have to make this album? They should have retired after Feed the Machine, because this album sucks. Feed the Machine was actually a good album. I thought it was one of the best rock albums of 2017. But fast forward to 5 years later, 2022, we get their album Get Rollin'. And this album is just not very good. It was just corny, generic Nickelback. And what's there really else to say, man? For real. I don't hate Nickelback like many other people, but this album should have never been made. If they were going to put out an album, they should actually put effort into it. This album just doesn't have much effort into it. Sure, the song San Quentin was great. Maybe a few other songs, but this album as a whole, it just sucks. It's easily one of the worst things I've ever heard from Nickelback. I mean, I don't hate the album, but it's just boring. There's nothing really going on for it. It doesn't feel like Nickelback. It just feels like Chad Kroger, or however you pronounce his last name. It just feels like it's his band now and he doesn't care. It's like the other guys don't even get their time anymore in the band because of Chad himself, you know. It just doesn't really feel like much of a Nickelback album. I thought it was actually going to be a Return to Roots album when I heard San Quentin, but nope, I was let down by the album, so I'm not going to check it out anymore. It's just not a very good album. so it's my most disappointing album of 2022. That's going to complete this video. Let me know y'all's most disappointing albums of 2022. This is my list, so before I go, I'm going to recap for you guys. So number 5 is Totem by Soulfly. Number 4 is Requiem by Korn. Number 3 is Love Sucks by Avril Lavigne. Number 2 is Dominion by Skillet. And number 1 is Get Rollin' by Nickelback. I'm the Flamehead 97. I'll see y'all next time. Peace.